Hi, this is Ron Martins at ronmartblog.com, and I'm here today to give you a demonstration of Nik Software's Color Effects. So, whether you're using PC or Mac, everything will be effectively the same in this demo. A lot of people like to start Nik Software's products with the Nik Selective tool. So if you go to the Automate menu from File and choose Nik Selective tool, you'll get this little window, and it has all entry points for all your Nik Software products. You can also go to the Filter menu and choose them from there. I like the little tool here because it allows me to have my favorites. Now, Nik Software Color Effects Pro 3.0 Complete had the idea of showing all your filters in alphabetical order in kind of groups, and then you could show your favorites. For Color Effects 4, you actually have just your favorites where it says filters here, and then you have recipes, which I'll talk about those more later. Let's just start with a really quick example of 3.0 to compare against 4.0. So I'll click the Tonal Contrast filter, which is one of my favorites that I used in 3, and let's see what happens. A new layer gets created, and voila, it comes up. Now the old UI is fairly basic. You have some stuff up here on the toolbar. It'll show you your filters once you've marked as favorites. They'll have red stars, and then you have these little tabs for the different categories that they have. And so up here for each filter, here's your individual settings. You have some quick slot saves where you can save some of your favorite settings for each of the filters. And there's not a whole lot, you can scroll through the list of filters and see what all they do. But there's not a whole lot of UI. It's pretty basic stuff. My original review was kind of rough on their UI and for 3.0, but honestly, it's better than most plugins out there. It's fairly robust on PC and Mac, and you've got different views between compare before and after and split view. So now that we know kind of what we have for 3, let's go take a look at 4 and see how things have improved. So let's come in here, and I'll just start with Tonal Contrast. Again, filters created. Now this time, it's showing me Tonal Contrast, and you'll notice a little bit more UI. So we have the filter list as before, and we have groups, but it's done a little differently. Instead of side tabs, they're showing up here, and there's more. There's some new ones like wedding and architecture and travel and so on. So that's nice. You still can access your favorites, and the same view styles are supported as before. Now, one thing you can also do is I can press this compare button, which is new, and that'll show me before, after, before, after. I can also now zoom if I press this in, and it'll zoom in to 200% or whatever value I've set, let's say 100%. And then when I pop out, it takes me out. Now this is a really small image, so I'm going to set this to 400. So this allows me to toggle back and forth between the zoom images, and I can drag this around to navigate. So this is a nice new feature. Zoom was kind of slow and cumbersome before. It's kind of rocking it now. I also can change the colors of my background. Something I generally don't do, but if it's kind of something that you enjoy, it's there. You can collapse these side panels. I think you can also hit the tab key, like you can do in Lightroom, to make them disappear. So tab turns them on and off. And then now you actually have your filter area as before. Now, Tonal Contrast is probably one of the most popular ones in color effects. And for people, a lot of times will do horrible things with skin. But there's also different modes and different things you can do. Like before, I would generally just turn my midtones to 0, and boom, I get rid of that kind of weird look on the skin, but still have some general improvements. Detail to the hair, a little more vibrance, and oomph to the shirt. So I can continue to do that, or if I put this back up at, say, 50, which is the default. Whoops. I can come in here and I can try different types of tonal contrast. Before we just had the standard and high pass, and standard seemed to behave a little differently than this standard. There's a fine, balanced, and strong. And so depending on what you're looking for, you can get different results. Now with people, it's pretty brutal. With landscapes and stuff, you might find these other ones actually be quite useful. So definitely check them out. And it's real time. As I hover over it, I immediately see the effect. Tonal contrast does include saturation. So for some people, they just want that saturation to be out. They just want whatever the effect is going to be. And so you see there's a lot more detail in this shirt without introducing saturation. But it also brings in a little more noise. So again, kind of what you want. Your ability to add control points to do things like eliminate an effect still exists. That's sort of the signature Nik software experience. So in a hurry, you can apply the filters. But here's something new. Before, you did one filter and then it was game over. You pressed OK and added it. Now, you have the added benefit of being able to say, let's do something else while I'm here. Like, oh, I don't know, dynamic skin softener, something people do quite often while they're in color effects. And so I can come in here, choose a skin sample, and that just basically says the origin color, and this reach says how much variation from that color do you want to apply this. So the default's 25%. That's usually about right, but you can add and remove that. I can also be real explicit and say, don't apply the effect to this shirt, but generally speaking, it's only going to apply it to where it belongs anyway. And so now I've applied both at one time. I can reorder, and sometimes that'll actually make a difference. The ordering can be important. This particular one, to get roughly the same result. I can come in here to tonal contrast again and say, you know what, I forgot to put a viewpoint on here to remove that effect from the background so that the background doesn't get all noisy. So I can do that. Put another one up here. But see, I lost the effect on her hair, so I may want to say, you know what, let's add it here. Let's just remove it there. Same thing over here. And so say, go ahead and give me a little bit right here to just double check, make sure it's all in there. Now, here's another cool feature, which kind of existed before, is that I can show what's going to be impacted by the filter. So just for this tonal contrast filter. So naturally, black conceals, white reveals. So see that I've eliminated the noise here, but I haven't really done anything about it down here. So I might want to go ahead and do that. And I can actually just add one in this mode. Oops. I want to remove the effect. Just in this area over here. Oopsie. 1 second. I'm going to do that. But here we go. If we go select this guy, we can delete it. You can also create control groups, like you can do with Vivesa. So let's see, let's get this guy here. We want opacity 0%. Remove that. And then we'll go to view. And so now we can see what's happening with these effects. And let's say, I do this all the time. I always do dynamic skin softener and tonal contrast. So I want to save this recipe. So, or save this combination of things. They call it a recipe. So I'll say save recipe, and I'm going to say tonal and actually skin soften and tonal contrast. So now I have a new custom filter, and I've thrown in a few of them. So here's my skin soften and tonal contrast. I can export that recipe and share it with a friend, or copy it to other machines so I don't have to keep creating these things. It remembers the values, but not the viewpoint controls naturally. There's even cool things now with viewpoint controls too, by the way, where you can turn them on and off and see the impact of using or not using tonal contrast, or in the controls. I can take the effect, something I couldn't do before, and actually lower the opacity. So I think, if it's a little too much, I could bring it down. And by that 80%, I take some of that shine off of her face that maybe I didn't like. I can come up here now, and I can copy the control points, put them on another layer, because that's effectively what these are, layers. I can reset the filter but keep my control points, or I can reset the filter and delete all my control points. Fantastic feature if you've had to ever deal with wanting to kind of start over but keeping all your control points. You can duplicate control points now, which you could do before, but just wasn't very obvious. And then you can group and ungroup. So lots of good stuff happening there. Down at the bottom, you still have your loop like you had before, but now you also can see the histogram easily. And then you can show any clipping that might occur on the image. Actually, I'm not seeing any right away on there, although it looks like we kind of have some here. And so that's not too sure that that's really working very well right now. But so let's see. We will go over here, and something else new that we have is called the history panel. So the nice part about this is it shows me everything that I've been doing since I've been in here. And I can use, when I do my before and after, I can control this to be what my before state was. If I brought this all the way down here, that becomes my new before and my new after. So that's kind of cool that you can change what the before is going to be. I can put it back to the original image, whatever I like. And then, as I mentioned, you can have a whole class of recipes, your own custom ones as well as ones that have been predefined for you. And then if you'd like to bring in any filters from your friends or from third parties or from your other machine, just simply click the import button. So this gives you a basic idea, and this gives you a basic edit as to what we would do to an image like this, just to give it a little bit more flair. And again, if you don't like the effect here, you can always use control points to modify it. But I'm happy with that for this exercise. And actually, I may even put a little saturation in there just for kicks and giggles. Usually does 20% by default. I'm going to do maybe 11%. And I'm probably going to remove a little bit of that effect off of her eye. Here. And let's say OK. And then here's a cool thing too. Before it used to just say color effects. So if you went back later, you weren't too sure what filter you applied. This time it actually shows you what you did. And in this case, since I used a recipe, it used the name of the recipe. If I were to use the tonal contrast filter, it would say that. So big improvement on the whole naming thing as well. So let's close that. And actually, let's do a save as on that. Save as. And we're going to just say PSD, sure, that's fine. Now, let's close that. And then let's pick another image. This time we're going to pick something, a little harder. We're going to go down here. Accidentally opened that up in preview by mistake. I forgot I didn't have that associated. And let's work on a different image. Now here's an image that I took using a GoPro camera mounted to my fender. And it's a cool image, but it didn't really turn out very well. It's kind of end of the day. I like the blur. I like everything that's happening here. It's just kind of dull and boring. So let's make it have a little bit more oomph, why don't we? So what we'll do is we'll start by trying to add a little more light. Now one cool way to add more light is to use this Reflector Effects. Oops, let's go back to this view. So what a Reflector Effects does is when I turn this on and off, you can kind of see it adds a little more light. Now it's doing this for the gold filter, which probably isn't what I want. I probably want a silver filter for this one. So if you look, see, aha, that's what it's doing. Now, if you really want to really see what's happening, kind of go extreme with these things. So I do like super bright or super dark, and then light fall off, super bright, super dark, and kind of see exactly what it's doing, like the level. You can kind of see around here this line that moves. So I want to have the light fall off a little higher, and then I want the light intensity to be a little brighter, and then I just want to apply it to the wheel. I don't want to really apply it to everything else. So I'm going to add a little positive one there, add another one to this effect here. Oops. Kind of expand the area that's impacted. And do one more right in here. And one more here on this red. And if I look at my control points, I can specifically identify what's being impacted by any given control point. So I'm going to move this one around a little bit. Okay, so now I kind of like what's happening here. Let's make sure it's not impacting my road. I really don't want it on my road. And let's just double check. It's not impacting my yellow lines. It's not impacting my fender. Okay, I think I'm happy with that. So we'll see a little before, after. Kind of just brighten that wheel up. I think there's a little spot on the road here too. I want to eliminate. Oops. Okay. So that's a good improvement, I think. Now, let's do something else with this. We can stack filters. So let's say add filter. Make sure you do that. You forget that when you replace the existing filter. And sadly, I've made that mistake more times than I care to mention. One of the ones I like to play around with a lot is polarization. I generally give it a shot a lot of times, just kind of see what I get with it. I've got a sky here, maybe I could use it. I've got kind of some reflective surfaces, and just kind of see what it does. This particular one's not really helping me a whole lot. If I go back and forth, I see a little bit more difference in the ground here, but nothing outstanding. So I don't want to use it, fine. I'll just either click X to remove it, or just select something different. So another one I like to try out is skylight. Now what skylight does is it adds a little bit more yellow. Let me just crank this guy all the way up so you can kind of get a taste of what it does. So if I really wanted to be crazy and kind of add more yellow to my line here, I would just grab a plus and put it on here. And what that's going to do is it's only going to apply it to that line. Nothing else will get it. So if I come down here to my control points, I'll see, okay, this is what all is impacted. So what I want to do is I want to make sure this is not impacted, because I want to keep that nice and silver. And I want to make sure this area up here really isn't impacted, because I kind of like the white look on the road. I want to make sure that this isn't impacted, because it kind of gives me a little reddish yellow look on my road that I don't like. And then I want to eliminate this. By putting these points on here, I'm impacting how things are affected. So now you see I've pretty much nailed it down to my stripes. There's a little bit up here, but I'm okay. I can live with that. A little bit here, it doesn't bother me. I don't want to go spend hours trying to fight through all that. But because I added just a plus, I want you to notice how it brought the opacity of the whole layer down to 0. If I had done a negative, it would have just negative that one part. I can bring it back up. I want to add some yellow back, but in this case, that's not what I want. So again, if you want to make sure you know where everything's being impacted, just take a look at that. but I'm still not done. We're better, but we're not where I want to be. Big difference before, but I still think we can do better. So let's maybe play around with something else. One of the ones we can do I like a lot of times is Pro Contrast. And for Pro Contrast, you can correct color cast and correct contrast. This dynamic contrast is kind of one that's pretty interesting. And I actually like the effect that, what it does to this image. So I'm going to actually just drag that up. This is one that's all new for 4. Before, the old Pro Contrast was kind of lame. This one's pretty slick, so actually I find myself using it a little bit more often than the one I did before. But wait, I'm still not done. Now I'm going to take things another step further. I'm going to play around with foliage. This is one I use for landscapes. If I want to try to bring some green into this area, or maybe even play with the yellow, I'll fool around with the foliage filter. So it starts off with yellow as the default. I'm going to go switch over to green and try to get some more green in these trees in this area here. And I'm just going to amp it up to 11 here. And when I do that, you notice it kind of changed the colors of this stuff too. This isn't really what I wanted. So I'm going to just come here and put a positive control point down on this area. And you notice how, bam, all of a sudden it's the only area impacted because it dragged this opacity down to 0. I'll do that again so you can see what happens. By default, we're at 100%. Take a plus control point, put it on some of this green foliage over here, and then boom, it drops it down to 0 for the whole filter and only applies it to that area. Exactly what I want. And then come over here at tree, and I'll just kind of grab this a little bigger. And just to make sure there's no color contamination issues, I'll put a negative down here. And lo and behold, look at that. It actually did change the color. So there was a little color contamination that I had to compensate for. So I've got a lot of things going here, but hey, why not? Let's just keep going. Let's go look at some other cool stuff that we have in here. If I go look into nature, there's one that people like to use a lot, brilliance and warmth. I think today, though, I'm going to play around with contrast only or dark and light and center. I might actually play around with both of those. So let's see, when I did that, what did it do? Oh, look at that. Right off the bat, it kind of darkened it, which kind of undid a little bit of the stuff that I did already. But it did it in a good way, because you see how we're getting more definition now? This road's getting a little darker. Things are just kind of shaping up a little bit better. But maybe, it's a little too much. Our contrast only is set to 50%. Maybe we'll bring that down to around 30%. And, to see what these things do, don't be afraid to experiment. You can crank it up, crank it down, and if you get things all out of whack, you don't know how to get it back to where it was before, just say reset filter. Boom, so right back to its defaults again. Very nice feature. And I can play around to see with the standard contrast, see what that's going to do for me. And then I can play around with saturation and so on. I think for this one, though, I'm going to just probably bring this down, maybe around 25, 30. And I think I'm pretty happy with that. I think I'm going to remove the effect from the wheel, because again, I'm really wanting this wheel to stand out, and I'm not wanting it to be contaminated by some of these changes that I'm making. So I could make control points bigger, but sometimes I prefer to do it this way, where I apply it to specifically the areas that I'm concerned about. And they can be sometimes different colors too, so that helps to make sure I get the right thing. Also want to make sure this little Porsche crest isn't too heavily impacted. So let's see what that filter do. You notice because I put all these control points, that when I deselect and select this, it didn't really change the wheel much. It just changed everything else, which is kind of what I wanted. So perfect. Get a little more definition of the trees, a little more definition of the road. I like what's happening overall here. Wanted to kind of brighten everything up. I can do that. This particular case, I'm going to just leave it be. And there's no law that says I can't do 2 of these. So if I add a filter, I'm welcome to come do another contrast again. So um, this time I could say, you know what, let's do some negative contrast, or let's do just a little brightness enhancement on this guy. And I'm totally free to do that. Um, it's kind of new concept being able to do these. And you can always see, what's the impact of these. Not only the current one, but let's see what happens if I remove the skylight filter from the mix. My stripe's not as yellow anymore. Definitely want to have that, so let's put that back on. So lots of good stuff. So for this, I'm going to be just about done. Maybe, let's see if there's anything else I want to add. Oops, make sure we hit that. Add. And oh, if I wanted to go back and add that thing that I just accidentally deleted, happens to us all sometimes, we can go back to contrast only remove, just kind of come back in time here. And so now we have that one. We can remove it again or stay where we were put. So really nice that we can actually go back and actually see and actually see what each thing did, so we kind of know what's going on. It's not quite as nice as Lightroom, where it actually shows you previews of what happened, but it's pretty good. So let's see. I think one other one I want to do is darken and lighten center. Before I do that, I need to make sure I add space for it. I'm going to add it. There's this place center control, so I'm going to place that center right here on my wheel. That's really where I want to keep things going. There's different types of shapes, and I'm going to keep this shape here. And then to see what it's doing, I can darken and brighten. I definitely want it bright here. That's my real objective. The border luminosity. See what that does. It kind of darkens the outside. So I kind of want to darken that. And then center size. Again, if you want to go extreme to see what it's doing, just put on some extreme value and watch what it does. And again, this is useful for the shape as well. Kind of see what's happening, the difference between the two shapes. Stick with this one here. And I'm going to say, okay. Let's make sure my whole wheel is kind of where I want it here. And then set this border luminosity back where I want it. I want it too extreme, just a little bit. And kind of see what this does again. It kind of brightens the wheel and then adds a little bit of a darkness in this area if I didn't like that. Come in here and knock that out. So a lot of flexibility, a lot of cool stuff. If anything else I want to do here before I'm done, let's take a look. Kind of do these on the fly. Graduated neutral density filter. If this wasn't blown out, then I could probably have some fun with that. Tonal contrast. No image is complete without tonal contrast, so let's throw that bad boy on here. Like a bada bing, bada boom. Let's watch what happens now. I can see the impact of the different effects. See that? Isn't that cool? It's like, oh wow. It's not just all one size fits all anymore. And for this one, I'm kind of liking the high pass better than the standard. I go back and forth on it. I like some effect. And I could use both and just kind of turn it on where it's needed. I think for this one, I'm going to probably go with high pass. And I can, again, tweak the saturation. I can play with different values. I can say what happens when I turn that to 0. Kind of like that a little bit better. I can drag these things drastically, see what they're going to do. and just kind of experiment. Now, what does that do? Okay, I see what that does. Gives more definition in my trees. And then same thing with saturation. Desaturate, saturate, saturate even more. So kind of play and experiment with that. I'm going to actually kick up my saturation a little bit more. But what I don't like is that I'm kind of making a lot of stuff look worse here. So again, I can reset this guy back to that default static setting. I'm going to come back here and high pass, boost up my saturation a little bit more. And then I'm maybe going to come back to this dark and lighten for a little bit and reduce the opacity of that effect in here, because I just don't like what's happening now that I've added my tonal contrast. And the change I see here is with all the filters. So subjective, or like it or hate it, is what you get. If I look at my tonal contrast, it's like I may not like what it's doing with my road there. I think it kind of ruined my road. So I'm going to actually come back over here. Oops. And I'm going to remove the effect from my road. Now, if you remember, early on, I had, when I was in here, I think it was, I had a bunch of control points that impacted the road. And so if I wanted to copy those, I could copy and paste them. But I had more than that, so I'm actually not going to do that here. I'm going to just come in here and stick to my current filter and just remove the effect from where I don't want it. I don't like what it's doing over here. Don't like what it's doing right there. Definitely don't want any impact in there. Don't like what it's doing over there. And just to be on the safe side, let's get a couple of these areas around here. And again, I can make these control points larger and smaller. I just tend to click around from time to time and get what I want. And if I liked all this, but still it was a little too much effect, I could also reduce the overall opacity of the effect. So we can still try some more. Let's actually go look at bicolored filters. Say, hey, is there something fun that we want to do here? Like add a little blue to the sky. We've got an effect here that might be pretty cool. It may make things worse. But really, this is all kind of your creative choices and stuff. There's a lot of things. If I don't like it, I can just remove it from the stack, call it good. I'll put a lot of work into this. If I want to maybe come back here another time and revisit these settings and I didn't use a smart filter, then I can always just save this as a recipe. So we're going to call this portion 911 GoPro Effect. And it saves the effect for me, and so I can always get back to it if I want to. So I'm going to say OK, and it's been applied. So before, after, before, after. Let's close that up. Oops, file, save as. And let's bring in one more. So for this last one here, okay. Ooh, the profile on this one is really weird. Let's try something again there. Let's see, does not have an embedded profile. Ooh, okay. Well, I think that one was originally Pro Photo. So what do we get with that one now? Ooh. Let's close it again. And one more time. Maybe it was sRGB. Yeah, there we go. Okay, so now we see it like we're supposed to see it. Some images, they're in pretty good shape from the start. So we may just want to do something really quick, like, all I want to do this one, honestly, is maybe a little skin softener and tonal contrast. If I would have marked that recipe as a favorite, it would have actually shown up in here. I forgot to do that, so no problem. Just come in here, get color effects, go into my custom recipes, and this time to remember, I'm going to go ahead and mark it as a favorite. So I'm going to click on it and see it says it's going to replace everything that's applied. I'm sure I'm fine with that. In fact, I don't want to see that anymore. And now we have the effect. And let's go ahead and turn that down to 0 so that we don't have that nasty effect on the skin. And I'm pretty happy with that. So I'm going to come here, say OK. Oops. And the effect's been applied. And if I want to do it again in the future, now I have it in my recipes folder. So in just a second, I have my image nice and edited, rocking, and done. Hope you enjoyed the video, and hope you like the new color effects as much as I do. I've been using it since it came out last fall and can't live without it.